right, everybody, welcome back to episode 3 of Obscuracast. I have my usual co-host and cohort, Danny O'Neill, with me. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. So it is a Tuesday today, so we've got a little bit of a topic that Dan knows a little bit more about. Most of the time, knows more about the obscure stuff than I do. He's a little bit more foray. He has a little bit more foray into that kind of stuff just because of his background with his family and his dad, and we can always get into that kind of stuff. But today we're taking on a topic that I think encompasses the name of the podcast, and today we're talking about sort of where we came from, and we're talking about two different types of civilizations today, and we sort of want to get into it in depth. Is the Sumerian culture, which essentially were correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel. Sumerian culture was basically the first culture to do a multitude of things, not only government wise, but inventions and all of that kind of stuff. They're the first recorded civilization to come up with some of the firsts that we even use today still. Is that correct?
Yeah. So according to mainstream archaeology, they're the ancient Mesopotamians. Um, they were they were supposedly the first to do, mythology and all that stuff. The other thing that's important to note is now we've talked about it before, Göbekli Tepe. Um, Ancient Sumeria might not be the oldest and the original, but mainstream archaeologists still are going to stand and die on that hill. But yeah, some very interesting stuff with ancient Sumeria and Mesopotamia and all that stuff. So
And like
it's
you
really
look
the
at
foundation
you,
of
it's the foundation of our entire existence. Essentially, they use a lot of.
exactly.
They had the first quote unquote democracy that's still sort of used today. They have a lot of inventions like boats and one of the big things I noticed that they have like minimal tools. They're minimal by today's standards, but back then they would have been pretty revolutionary. Like the one that I saw that really intrigued me, or a couple that I saw that really intrigued me, were like the pickaxe. Like
Hmm.
imagine mining without a pickaxe. But like just little things like that, and there's also extrapolated ideas and stuff that we'll talk about on the podcast today. Um, that are firsts and stuff that even today we still use in form, I guess is the best way to put it. We don't use it exactly, but we take a lot of precedent from that stuff. And it's why, the Sumerian culture, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of like the blueprint for a lot of stuff we use in today's world. Is that right?
A lot of it, yeah. Hmm.
Um, and then the second one we're going to get into is the Anunnaki, which is an uh, interesting notion as well, considering that a lot of people believe the Anunnaki were the. I think this is right. Again, I could be wrong. You would have a better stance on this than I would, but essentially, they're the
Hmm.
other side of the coin, where they were like the if the Sumerians were the mortal, let's say the mortal version of human beings, the Anunnaki would be more of the extraterrestrial life, or like the explanation for why the Sumerians were able to do what they were able to do. Is that correct?
Oh, so the Anunnaki, the best way, they're the first mythological story, right?
Okay.
So you have
So
like
essentially we're
the
talking about
ancient,
the exact same thing, and we'll get into like the mythology and like how extraterrestrial life might play into that, and what
so
might replace the other, and that kind of thing. But keep going, go ahead.
yeah, so like like ancient Greece, Rome, they have their mythology.
which
This
is which
is
is
Sumerians.
polytheistic. If anybody is curious,
Ex
anybody doesn't know about Roman or Greek mythology, there's two schools of thought. There's a monotheistic, which would be like your Christian, your Buddhism, that kind of stuff. And then you have polytheistic, which would be like your multiple gods, multiple realms, that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
Correct. So this is like that. The Egyptians too, also Native American history. They
Correct.
had
Yep.
several gods, right? Okay. And actually, when we dive really deeper into this episode tonight, uh, we'll talk about Native American history
I mean, we even
too,
Roman
because
and
a lot of
Roman
it's
and Greek mythology, because I'd like to do even. I mean, you'd even
yeah.
you could even throw Norse mythology in there too.
You can because it people look at mythology as it's a fake story, right? But if you look ancient astronaut theory, which is what we're talking about, ancient astronaut theory is where you take these mythological stories and they're not just stories, they're actual events that happened. And some of it, um, I don't think all of it, but I think some of it is very interesting where it's like, well, there actually kind of is proof here. Like it's really interesting. I've spent a long time studying it, so
Well, I think the first thing we should get into is the probably. I think we should take it from the Anunnaki perspective first to sort of understand why the Sumerians were so successful. So I guess the Anunnaki, like you said, it's the first mythological story, or I've always took the stance of like mythology and and extraterrestrial life can kind of go hand in hand if you really take a deep look at it, or even a surface look at it. Um, my view, obviously, I think I've mentioned it a couple times on this show. I'm agnostic, um, by definition. So essentially, I don't pretend to know anything I don't know. I do believe there is a life force, energy, um, something that is above us, and something that we don't understand or don't pretend to understand. I grew up Episcopalian. I grew up Presbyterian, so I have an idea of how organized religion works. Um, but if you look at, let's say God, Buddha, Vishnu, I guess a monotheistic view of religion, it is something that is otherworldly. Wouldn't you agree?
yeah, absolutely.
So if you look at that from that point of view, what's out of this world? You would think extraterrestrial life or something that's not of this planet. And it's interesting to look at that dynamic and see that they're kind of similar. Um, from a polytheistic point of view, if we're talking about Roman and Greek and Norse mythology, like we said earlier, it's the same concept. You just have people responsible for different things, right?
Yep.
Um, there's a god of thunder, there's a god of war, there's a god of peace, there's a god of time. That basically any kind of.
Wa
Go ahead.
water,
Right.
sun,
Poseidon, Sun,
everything.
Apollo, depending on
Yes.
which religion you're talking about, right?
Right. Right.
It's all sort of tied to this otherworldly being and something that's not capable or is more capable from a mystic point of view, something that's not out, something that's outside our understanding. So if you look at it from that point of view, I think that dynamic in that debate is actually really interesting. And for a long time, and this is becoming more commonplace now, science and religion were bitter rivals. They couldn't stand each other. There were conflicting ideals. There were two extremes. And now you have people sort of buying into both sides. One could be true for this, the other could be true for that. And I think that's where the conversation that we're having tonight with the Sumerians and the Anunnaki really is pertinent, and it's worth talking about. So I'll let you go into a little bit of the Anunnaki and sort of more or less what they were, because we sort of went over the Sumerians, that they were sort of a human civilization. One of the earliest, if not the earliest, on probably common record with archaeologists and people that have studied them. Um, but essentially, we're talking about one, and it was interesting. I watched a couple documentaries on both, um, and they were talking about the fact that the Anunnaki was responsible for teaching civilizations such as the Sumerians or the Aztecs or the Incas, or very advanced civilizations for the time, how to do things. And I thought that was interesting. But I don't know if you have a take on that, if it's a little bit different from your point of view. So I want to sort of hear what you got on that.
Um, as far as the Anunnaki goes, is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So like, in your view, from the little information that I have, you have more information than I do. What is sort of the relationship between the two as far as the Anunnaki and other civilizations like the Sumerians that were able to extrapolate things from them, or that kind of thing. So where do you sort of
So,
stand on that?
so essentially, you kind of want me to give the background of it, of like how it
Yeah, so
started.
like I'm assuming the
Okay.
Anunnaki aren't the only people or the only species or whatever you want to sort of call it on record that have.
Deities.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my
Yeah.
that's my
Okay.
point, is that like they might be the most prominent or whatever you want to call it, but they're not the only thing on record that has been documented. So go ahead.
No, so the Anunnaki, basically the Sumerians said that the Anunnaki created a human alien hybrid, which is us, okay, to basically be their slaves to mine gold because what's going on right now, where you have scientists that want to cool the planet because of global warming, whatever you believe on that, whatever, for the sake of this story, just stick with me. They wanted to cool their planet. They needed to cool their planet because their planet was overheating. To save their planet, they released gold particles. Gold was used to essentially create this layer, this shell around the planet to cool it. And they realized that planet Earth has an abundance of gold. It's actually one of the rare planets in, don't hold me to this, it's either the universe or the solar system or whatever. For whatever reason, this planet, we have more abundance of gold here than a lot of other places. So what they did was they got here, and again, I'm paraphrasing. They got here and they realized that there's, you know, essentially cavemen. They could work. They're not very, they're somewhat intelligent, right? But they needed them to be a little bit more. So what they did is they created alien human hybrid. That's why, if you look at the gap between us being hunter gatherers and then to us living in civilizations and building these buildings and monuments and all this stuff, it's really a short period of time in history. For so long, we were hunter gatherers, lived in caves, maybe tiny little huts, but not cities, not, building the wheel and building things. So when you actually get to this short period of time, this is a way to explain what happened, because
So
they created an alien
it's to fill
hybrid.
the gap, is essentially
Yeah.
what you're saying, of stuff that we don't
Mm-hmm.
understand or stuff that we don't have record for. So keep going. I just wanted to clarify that
Yep. Yeah.
in case anybody was curious what the hell he was talking about.
Yep. Thank you for that.
It's to fill the gap of information or culture or species or whatever you want to point it to. It's the way to fill the gap of that gap to make it make sense. Go ahead.
Correct. And the Anunnaki, which translates to princely blood or seed of Anu, okay? Um, Not those who came down or those who came from heaven to earth, as many modern sources claim. Um, they're Sumerian deities of the old primordial time, okay? They're gods who were the children of the sky god Anu and his sister Kai. Significantly, some scholars have come to realize that the Anunnaki should be more appropriately considered demigods or semi-divine beings. Apparently, Anu's sister Kai was not originally considered a deity and was only ascribed the status of goddess much later in the history of the myth cycle. This is a paragraph from ancientorigins.net, and that is the history of myth and legends from Anunnaki. If anybody wants to look it up,
And like I
maybe
said, you can send
late.
me links after the podcast and we can put the
Yeah,
links to different information because we did it with the previous episode. So if you
yeah,
guys are curious, Dano will send me, um, or I can send them to him, whatever the case is, and we can put these articles so you can actually read them from yourself from the sources that we're talking about.
yeah. So, what's really cool And Blake, I'm sure you've seen it a handful of times. Most of the time, I don't know if we were 100% coherent or with reality, but uh, my dad, collected ancient artifacts, and
Sure.
my dad actually had um, some ancient Sumerian tablets, and he had ancient Sumerian cylinder scrolls.
Yep.
Um, so when you take these cylinders, it's a cylinder seal. So what you do is it's cylinder shaped, and you take clay and you roll it. Okay, and when you roll it, it tells a story in the clay.
So
Um,
essentially, it's a makeshift tablet that's cylindrical.
Correct. So that way, what they could do is they could make these, and then they could roll it, and then they could tell a story like a book, and they would put it on these tablets,
Yeah.
right?
So essentially, you would think
Um,
about it as like a scroll or a book or a page of a book.
mm-hmm, 100%. Um, and then also, my dad had ancient Sumerian scrolls. He actually had an adoption contract of a high official who purchased a child, an enslaved child, um, and he had that contract. It was really interesting. You could learn a lot from it. Just how, I mean, you know, it's amazing that that long ago they had contracts and stuff, and just, the language and stuff. Then he had another tablet that it was ancient algebra from Sumeria. They created algebra.
Well, that's the other
Okay.
thing too, is that like we're talking about first, right?
Yeah. A lot
Algebra.
first.
The one I heard, the two I heard from my arithmetic stance was geometry and algebra.
Yes.
They were the
Yeah.
first to
And
cultivate that and make that a thing. Um,
mm-hmm.
but I think the thing that is interesting about the Sumerians is that they weren't experts in one area, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
you look at civilizations like the Spartans or the Romans or the Greeks. They're known for a lot of things, but there's a couple things, I would say 4 or 5 maybe, like a handful, that they were known for. Like they were the experts to a T in it. The Sumerians, however, were experts in everything. You name it, they came up with a way to do it. That's what I
Yeah,
think is
and it's
really interesting about that culture,
yeah,
is that they didn't come up with a first, they came up with the firsts.
they were the first to understand frequencies and mathematics.
So like you think about
I
your
mean, it's
Nikola Teslas, you think about your Albert Einsteins, your John Oppenheimers, like this is where all that stuff came
they,
from. It's interesting.
well, and Tesla studied this stuff. He studied ancient Sumeria and Anunnaki because he that's how he got the idea of, free energy, right? And now there's been a big discovery in ancient Egypt with these huge columns that are buried, 40 meters below the pyramids that are wrapped in copper. And, Edgar Casey, a long time ago in the 1800s, he was known as a sleeping prophet, said that that the pyramids in Egypt, they were a operation, they were a machine. They weren't a burial ground. And to this day, there have not been actual burial tombs found. They never found a body in the pyramid. So they believe that it was a factory for energy. And there's a lot of things out there to support that. We could do a whole nother episode on that. But to get back to the Anunnaki, which they have ties to Egypt too, um, we are essentially their slaves to mine gold because they need this gold to keep their planet safe and alive. And they've run out of gold at their own planet. So every, I think, 10 to 13,000 years, they come back, which is interesting because so many different religions a lot of different religious stories and myths and whatever, they like kind of all connect like a puzzle with this because if you think about it, supposedly there was a great flood, right?
Right.
Everybody talks about a great flood, not just Christianity, but Hindus, Buddhists, Jewish, every religion talks about this great flood that happened about 10,000 years ago. And now they've actually are able to look at, study, uh, different water levels. And it's come out that, yeah, there actually was a great flood about, I think, 10,000 years ago, 13,000 years ago, something like that. Well, these guys just happen to come back every 10 to 13,000 years, and that's why everybody says there's a great reset. Every 10 to 13,000 years, there's a great reset, and that's what these guys do. And that they've been coming around for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years. I mean, it goes way, 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 way back.
I was going to say, if we're
So,
touching on the Great Reset, one of the biggest, if not the most influential as well, organized religions would be like your Christianity, your Catholics, that kind of thing, right? And I think what's interesting is there was in the documentary that I watched, they talked about 3 different resets that have happened over the course of our, let's call it, precognitive existence, right? There's a Genesis 1, a Genesis 6, and a Genesis 11 that they touched on that I thought was interesting. Those are sets of 5,
mm-hmm.
right? And I think that's interesting because we've adopted, you can point it to a lot of different things in society, but I think the thing that's most interesting is that it seems to be a pattern. It seems to be a regiment, it seems to be a schedule. I think that's interesting.
It is interesting. That's a lot of people think that's because we're in the Matrix. This is all
Well,
hologram in the
the
computer.
Matrix, the Matrix again could be a whole different episode. That could be a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love those
I'm just,
movies, and those
I'm
movies are, they were very, especially the first one, because the sequels and the one then like the anime and all that kind of stuff, it sort of took a turn because they were looking for viewership and that kind of stuff. Once people sort of got over the fact that the Matrix was the Matrix and all that kind of stuff, but I think the first movie speaks volumes about the fact that we are living in a fabricated world that is manufactured, and we are in a dream world, so to speak. We're in a world that does not exist. It's not real.
mm-hmm.
And it's made up of entities that are not necessarily human or are there for, because you hear about it all the time, right, on the news and stuff, like, hey, this person went rabid and started killing people, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting because of the fact that the Matrix, if the Matrix does in fact exist, that could be a program implanted saying, hey, this person's knows more than they need to know or anything like that. It gets touchy, right? Like you start talking about this kind of stuff and people get all up in arms and say, oh no, he was crazy, he had depression, all that kind of stuff. But the thing that's interesting is that if the Matrix is real and it is a real thing and it is something that is palpable and something that's actually going on, if you look at the movie itself as a sort of a weird extrapolation of what's going on, if you look at the Matrix, Neo comes in as a regular Joe, right? He happens to be the person that has all the answers, right? But he's been brainwashed to the point that he doesn't realize what he's capable of. And then they start, quote unquote, injecting information into him, and he starts to become and realize that he's the prophet and the one that's going to save the universe and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting. It's a very insane extrapolation of what might be going on. But think about that in the
Mm-hmm.
same context as we have as a god or a monotheistic or a polytheistic religion.
Well,
In that
it's
movie, in that
interesting.
universe, Neo is a prophet. He is a god. He is a
Yeah.
top tier being that knows more and is able to do more than is humanly possible. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead with what you were going to say. I'm sorry. I wanted to sort of
It's
finish that
interesting.
point because it's important. There are relationships between these different things that we're talking about, and we need to make those connections. It's not just ancient culture. It's not just mythological. It's in pop culture. It's in every single
Mm-hmm.
fabric of what we do in popular life and how we exist.
Yeah, and I don't believe in coincidences. I really don't. I don't know how you feel about that, but like there's a reason why all this shit kind of connects. They all, right? It's like a big puzzle piece and they all connect in some way, right?
But the fun is figuring it out.
The fun is figuring it
How
out
they put
and,
together and how they sort of shape the whole picture, if you want to put a big air quotes on that, but go ahead.
and as far as, talking about the Matrix, when you said that, somebody loses their mind and shoots up a school or does this mass murdering thing, oh, he lost his mind. He was having a psychotic break, an episode. What if that's just a corrupt file? What if that's a virus, like
Or
a computer
Hydra or
virus?
Trojan, or yeah. It's an
Yeah.
interesting way of looking at it.
Is it an NPC that just went wrong?
Yeah. I mean, it exists all the time. And, I'm a big foray into computers. If you guys didn't know, I'm an IT tech by trade. That's what I do as a day job. But you see all the time with people trying to infiltrate infrastructure. It's not necessarily just computers,
Mm-mm.
it's everything from, we can get into, there's different stuff that we could get into as far as that's concerned. But the main point is, in every sect of life, there's always going to be something or someone or a piece of energy that's going to infiltrate something stable. And then when you look at it from that perspective, and I'll just go back to computers, there's a way to combat that. What if that's what's really going on? It's interesting.
I didn't used to believe that like really like a human could be an NPC. Then I started paying attention to the state of Florida and how fucking wild that state is. And I believe it now. I believe it's like a fucking Grand Theft Auto game. It's insane.
Yeah.
The shit that you see, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But to get back on the topic, what's interesting is, and again, this goes with like the whole fitting the puzzle and how like this incorporates all religions and whatnot. Uh, are you familiar with Nephilim in the Bible?
The Bible more so than if they're connected, I wouldn't know, but I am familiar somewhat
Um,
with the Bible, at least the, let's say, the quote unquote big air quotes again, important stuff.
so have you heard of Nephilim before?
No, I am
That
not.
word? Okay. Nephilim are in the Bible, by the way. And Nephilim are half divine beings born of mortal women. Uh, they're giants. Okay.
So before you continue, I think it's important to make this connection, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're talking about people that are half human, half divine, correct?
Right, and this comes from the Anunnaki. This is part of this fits that puzzle.
Now, namely, right now, you said it yourself. The text we're talking about is the Bible, correct?
Yep.
Okay. If we're talking about the Bible and people that are half divine, demigods, half divine, what about Hercules? What about Achilles?
Right.
It's the same
Right.
thing.
It's the same thing.
It's the
But
same
just
thing.
it's the same thing, but the names are changed, right? That's essentially what it comes down to. Same story, we just changed the fucking names, right?
It's wild.
It is wild. It's absolutely wild. I mean, if you look, You know, something that I don't know if you've ever looked into it or any of our listeners, the book of the Epic of Gilgamesh, hell of a book, because Gilgamesh, ancient Babylonian, aka Mesopotamian, ancient Sumerian, all that, ancient Babylonia, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh talks about Jesus Christ coming, like to a T, the whole fucking story of Jesus. And Gilgamesh wrote that novel 7,000, 7,000, either like 5,000 or 7,000 years before. Again, like, don't crucify me if I'm off on that. But it's definitely thousands of years before uh, Jesus came.
So essentially, it was around more
Think
than
about
once. There
that.
was more than one instance, is what you're saying.
Yeah, essentially, like, you know, can't. He came here more than once to warn us, to save us from ourselves, and we're always stupid and dumb. There's been more than one messenger. It's different times, different names, but it's all the same thing of saying like, "Hey, you're like you guys are getting out of hand, right?" I mean, we're pretty fucking out of hand right now. I don't know. What do you think? Like the world's fucking insane now.
Comes back to the word, one word. Hey guys, it's time to reset.
Yeah, and we're right at about that time
It's,
too. It's
it's time.
interesting.
It's time to hit the reset button on the N64.
And there's a bunch of volcanoes that are all of a sudden waking up and all these earthquakes that are happening in the Pacific and just really weird shit. I'm
Just,
waiting for that super volcano to go off in Yellowstone.
dude,
That'll fuck
it's
shit up.
one of those things. It's like it comes back to what I said at the very beginning of the podcast, very beginning of the episodes, or the episode itself. It's a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
It's a ticking clock.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep.
It's actually wild. Like if you really think about it, we're on a schedule. We don't know what the schedule is, or well, we know what the schedule is, but we don't know who's coming. We don't know for sure.
According to Edgar Casey, which Dad loved Edgar Casey. He studied his readings and his books and everything. Uh, my uncle, we should have my uncle on here sometime because he's into that stuff too.
Well, I was gonna say we're gonna have a like that's the other thing too is that we're gonna start to bring on people that have some more knowledge than even Dan or myself, and Dan has a lot more knowledge as far as supernatural stuff and stuff like that because he's delved into it more. I have ideas about what we might talk about, but he's gonna be sort of the proprietor of sort of giving us the context, and then we'll sort of extrapolate that from there. But I know we have a couple people in mind. I know your uncle is one of them. Brendan, one of our really good friends, wanted to talk about some stuff that he's been interested in too. And the cool thing about this podcast and this show in general is that we're like I say every episode, we're going to talk about stuff that makes you think. It's never going to be a one-sided discussion. And I think that's what's going to make it really cool, and the fact that we can go off on tangents and have different people on that'll be able to add to the conversation. It's going to be interesting. I'm really excited to have some of those people on. Your uncle would be a great asset to the show for sure.
Yeah, he would be really good. But what Edgar Casey said is we're the fifth generation of human beings.
Yeah, I did see that in the documentary as well. Yeah, I did see that too.
Mm-hmm.
Where the
We're
fourth or fifth reset that has happened.
Yes, yes, and what's interesting is that if you look at the ancient Egyptian uh mythology, right? Their story, it is like spot on with the Anunnaki and essentially creating these alien hybrids, and then it got split. So there was actually like a fight in a war because um, one of the higher up Anunnaki, I forget the name, they found out that they were mating with female humans, okay? to create these hybrids, and like they got pissed off. So that's why that this story breaks off into why the Aztecs and Mayans have their similar mythology because they were separated. They moved to South America, some of the Anunnaki, to create their own alien hybrids there. And then you have in Africa with Egypt, and then you also have the same story in ancient Asia.
So essentially, what you're talking about is,
Three families, essentially, three families, three leaders, breaking off.
yeah, but essentially what you're talking about is not, I wouldn't necessarily say superhumans, but you're talking about people that are capable of more and are
God,
able to do more than the average person.
they're gods.
Well, not
All of
necessarily.
your
Well,
Marvel,
I wouldn't say necessarily gods. What I would say is if they're creating
we
these,
would consider them
well,
gods.
no. I'm saying so that's fine. But what I'm saying is what they created as their slaves is what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking
Oh
about
yeah,
an
yeah,
extension
absolutely.
of that, right?
Yeah,
So
and that's
what I'm saying is that like you look at people like the Spartans, the Trojans, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas. You're looking at civilizations that have paved the way for the rest of civilization. They have taught people before or after them ways to do things. That's what's really
the
interesting about
Sumer.
that topic is you're talking about a chain of command or a chain of of knowledge going from the top of the food chain, quote unquote us, right? Because human beings are supposed to be the quote unquote top of the food chain in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
How do you extrapolate that to what else might be going on in the universe? That's what I'm talking about, is that like
Yeah.
we're a very small subset of the universe. We're a very small subset of life in the universe. You have to believe that, because if you don't, you're just flat out naive. Period. It's too big.
Mm-hmm.
What if we're not
Yeah, it's
necessarily the top of the food chain? What if we're the bottom in the grand scheme of things? It's
I
interesting.
mean, listen, if there is other beings out there that are interdimensional and able to travel to different universes, galaxies, let alone planets, yeah, they're ahead of us. Like they're smarter than us. If somebody can get to us from light years away, they're already ahead of us.
It's like the genius
Which,
IQ thing, though. That's the food
mm-hmm,
chain that I'm talking about, is that like you look at the average person, they're not a genius. They don't have a genius IQ. They're not able to invent
mm.
things and stuff like that. What if that's the next tier? And then it goes up from there and up from there and up from there and up from there. You get what I'm saying?
So it's interesting with the genius thing, right? Um, Nikola Tesla, genius, right? Like just like super smart, wanted to do all good for the world, free energy, all this stuff. Um, a lot of people think he fit it. Have you ever heard of the Philadelphia Project?
No.
Okay, do me a favor while I'm talking, look this up on your computer. Philadelphia Project. It's something that he worked on first, and the government took his patent and all his stuff after he died, tried creating it. That's insane. But um, with like this genius thing, okay? Nikola Tesla, genius, Einstein, all those guys. Did you know that Leonardo da Vinci, there's 7 years, like he was an okay artist, but there's 7 years where he disappears from the record books and supposedly like lived in this cave, and then he comes back 7 years later and is just the best painter in the world and like has knowledge beyond belief, like artwork so good that it looks real. And not only that, if you look at the painting that he does, you know, The Last Supper, that painting, that very famous painting?
Yeah,
Did you know that all of the fruit, I think it's the fruit and like the vegetables and like food that's on the table and on that painting, did you know that those are actually musical notes and there's a song in that painting?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's another good one to look up. That's another one. Uh, and supposedly, if you invert the pictures on some of his stuff, his pictures inverted literally show gray aliens and the Nordics. There's essentially, I think there's like 18 or 19 alien races, maybe a little bit more now, but there's for sure like 19 that we know of. Um, there's an ex-Canadian, I think, ambassador or defense minister that came out and said that there is a galactic council. We talked to them. There's 18 or 19 races that we know of, that we talk to, that they're here. We don't know. Normal civilians wouldn't know that they're here. The whole Men in Black thing is real. Um, but yeah, like it's really interesting looking at all this stuff, and you know, I don't know. From a very young age, the whole, and I do believe in religion to an extent, but from a very young age, I always thought that, you know, people say magic isn't real, um, but then people would pray, right? Like you would hear stories where like a miracle happens where people are praying and they all come together as a big group and they pray and they end up, some miracle happens and it saves someone's life, right? Like
Right.
they miraculously just whatever. But then people say that magic isn't real. Well, my question is, and I always thought this from a very young age, okay? What the fuck is the difference between a prayer and a magical incantation?
Yeah, it's a mantra.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, I would tend to agree
It's the
with you on
same
that.
thing. And depending on your third eye, right, and your pineal gland, which that's a whole nother thing, depending on how strong your inner eye is, your third eye, maybe those prayers are a quote unquote magical incantation. And then I started thinking when I was younger, what if angels aren't just these heavenly beings? What if angels are extraterrestrials?
Well, that's my
I've
whole.
thought this
Well, dude,
way.
that's my whole
bef-
point. That's my whole point
Right.
with the deity stuff is they're connected. It's the same thing.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You have a otherworldly being that is capable of more than the average human or average person, and they descend. What do aliens do? They descend. They come here.
Yep.
You hear about these things as like, oh, God showed up to me and he was glowing. What do you think an alien's gonna do? Glow.
Yeah, there might be some radiation.
You get what I'm saying? Like it's the same thing.
Yeah. It's the same
But
thing.
that's what
I
that
think they're
I'm
the
sort of
same
on the
thing. They're
same
hand
tip
in
as
hand.
you as far as I thought that from a very young age, maybe not as young as you because you had your father and a little bit more foray
Mm-hmm.
into what we're talking about, but
Well,
as
my
I've
father, don't forget, Dad was strong Catholic. I mean, he really, you know, big Jesus, all that stuff. Not until there was a walk that him and I did, and it was one of the last walks, because, you know, he had that neuropathy
yeah.
that was really bad. One of the last walks him and I did on Christine Drive, Christine, you whore. One of the last walks we did was before I moved to Pittsburgh, and him and I were talking about this stuff, and he goes, you know, I just have a really hard time believing now where I'm at in life that if you're a Jew or a Buddhist or a Muslim or whatever, and you've lived a great life and you've helped people and you've been good to them, and you lived a whole peaceful life, that just because you're not Catholic and you believe something else, that you're going to spend your time in hell.
Well,
He's like, I don't think I believe that anymore.
hell, heaven, whatever you want to put
Right.
on it, a bad place or a good place.
Right. He's like, just because you don't believe, but you lived a great life, but because you don't believe, you're going to end up in hell. He's like, I'm kind of starting to think that, like, there isn't just one right answer.
Right.
And you know how much my dad,
Or every answer is the right answer. You're just looking at it from a different perspective.
right. And even though my dad was always super Catholic, right? Like, I grew up Irish Catholic. I went to Catholic school till middle school. Even though he was super Catholic, my dad is the one that always, like, taught me this stuff at a very young age. And, like, I was introduced to this stuff at a very young age as far as the Anunnaki, ancient Sumerian, because he collected all this shit
Right.
and he read it, and he read Edgar Casey and he read all this stuff. So it's interesting to see that transformation.
And it was physical evidence. It wasn't something that he was just talking about. It's stuff that we could actually touch, feel, smell, see, that kind of stuff.
No, yeah, I mean, how many times would we be, in the living room and he'd be talking about this stuff and he'd be like, you know what, hold on one second. And then he goes and he gets an ancient Sumerian scroll.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
it's a it's a whole different animal. Instead of just talking about it, you're seeing it, you're holding it in your hand, and you know, between the Book of Enoch, which that was in the Bible, that's a first-hand account of an extraterrestrial abduction, and then the Vatican took it out. That's one of the books, because the Bible is just a series of books, right? That's all it is. A series of books all in one. And that is a book that they took out. It was the Book of Enoch. Um,
But I think getting back to it, I was able to sort of read over the Philadelphia experiment or the Philadelphia, you know, secret experiment and stuff like that. I was sort
yeah,
of mulling over it and sort of what it was about. It's interesting considering it seems a lot from what I've read. I didn't scroll all the way to the bottom, but from the vast majority that I read, it's cloaking technology.
100% it's cloaking technology. Yep, but they fucked up because Tesla wasn't involved in it when they actually performed that. That's why those guys' bodies were stuck in the metal. You know when Tesla died? Do you know what happened
No.
when he died? All right, when Tesla died, he was living in I forget the hotel. It's a hotel in New York. I mean, uh, Edison stopped funding him. Him and Edison were rivals, and Edison was funding him. And when Tesla finally figured out free energy, Edison and J.P. Morgan and all those guys back in the day, those greedy bastards, said, "Well, how are we gonna charge people? Like, how are we gonna monitor it?" And Tesla said, "Monitor it? You don't monitor it. It's free energy. Like they have it for free." Well, they stopped funding him and they tore down his Tesla tower and his coil and all that stuff. Well, he ended up penniless and broke, but he had like 100 patents or 99 patents. Dad actually had two copies of his patents, by the way. I have those. Um, when he died, his nephew went to go collect his belongings, and when he got there was like nothing left. The FBI, I think it was the FBI or the CIA, confiscated 99 patents. They went to his room and got there before anybody else.
Interesting.
Do you want to know something even more interesting? Do you know who worked for, I believe it was the FBI or CIA at that time. You can look this up too. Look this up. Do you
Was it
know who
during
led
this?
that raid?
Was it during this experiment?
So the raid, I can't remember when he died. I think the
Oh, this is
experiment
when he died. No, I don't know.
happened.
No, I don't know.
This is. Do you know who led that raid?
Mm. Tell me.
Trump's grandfather.
Really?
Yep. Yep. That was Donald Trump's grandfather led that raid. Not only that, there is a book that was published long time ago that literally Donald Trump's son and like it's a weird story and I don't know the whole thing. I haven't read it. I haven't really looked into it, but I've heard of it. But it's almost like a time travel story where like Donald and his son, what's his son's name? What's Donald Trump's son's name?
I'm blanking. Hold on a second. Let me look.
Tall one, the tall one, the
Yeah,
youngest one.
let me look. So,
Because there's a book and it has his name and a bunch of other people's name. Like it is a
is
time
it
travel
Baron or
story and
Eric?
like
Eric.
Baron. It's about Baron because there's a boy named Baron that comes back and like fights off the evil. Like it's just weird. This book. And if you can type it up and look it up. Do like Baron Trump time travel book. I guarantee you it'll pop up. Let me know what you find. But it is weird because there's a lot of shit that has happened that you're like, what is this? This is weird. Like, this is like that whole weird Matrix thing going on. It's just very, very interesting. But, you've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
Very sparingly. Your dad told me about it way back when.
Oh, okay, do you remember what the Dead Sea Scrolls are?
They were. I'm gonna probably butcher the hell out of this. They
It's
were.
okay.
They were sent. From what I remember, didn't they have to do with like pieces of the Bible or something like that?
So the Dead Sea Scrolls, very, very close. The Dead Sea Scrolls, you know how the Bible's written in like third person?
Yeah.
It's like someone else's, right? Like it's third person.
Right.
The Dead Sea Scrolls is a first person. It's happening right now in front of me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's that makes more. I
Okay.
remember now. Yeah.
My, I mean, Dad was infatuated with the Dead Sea Scrolls because when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, they were found by accident. They were found in these caves, in these cylinders, these clay cylinders. And they were found on accident because these kids, they were throwing rocks from the bottom of this mountain valley or whatever, throwing rocks in these caves, and all of a sudden they heard like something break. So these kids climbed up there and they found all these clay cylinders, and inside the clay cylinders had these scrolls. Well, the townspeople, very poor, they live in the desert, right? They were using the scrolls as kindling for fire until somebody alerted, I think a professor or some government official or whatever, um, and they went and they found them and they collected what they found. They're like, oh my God, these are, these are fucking beyond historic. So that's the Dead Sea Scrolls are a first-hand account of Jesus' story, which you never have had that before. You've never had a first-hand account. All these stories have always been, third person.
Right.
But these are the stories of like actual first person accounts. That's what makes it so intriguing, I
Yeah.
guess is the word, or amazing. And in Israel, I know you were in Israel. They have the Dead Sea Scroll Museum there. It's in Israel.
Yeah,
Um,
I never went to it, but I did the vast majority of the stuff I saw because I was with a when I went to Israel, I essentially went to go play overseas basketball, and I went with a church group that was doing sort of like a retreat. They were all guys that were involved with uh like they were a church group. I can't remember where they were based out of, but essentially there was a uh, priest or pastor that led the retreat, and we were able to go to like the stations of do the stations of the cross. We walked the entire stations of the cross. We went to the Mount of Olives. We went to the Sea of Galilee. We went to a bunch of different like um, Bible locations and locations where Jesus sort of carried out whatever he carried out. And again, it's interesting because we're talking about stuff that you've only read in a book, right? And then you're
mhm.
standing there looking at it.
Seeing it, you're seeing it. Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to like think that like all this went down exactly where I'm standing. It's wild.
Mm-hmm. I'll I'll never forget when, you know, my dad was very successful. We traveled a lot. I got to travel when I was really young. So I got to go to Ireland, London, and, all over the Caribbean and stuff like that. My parents went to Egypt and France and Italy and all sorts of shit. Um, which it was cool being able to travel when I was that young, going to these places. But what sucks is I didn't appreciate it because, like I was six,
Right.
6, 8, 10. You don't appreciate it. When I was for my 21st birthday, my dad took me to London, England, and then Paris, France. Okay. And my stepbrother, he was in high school, and his mom didn't want to pull him out to take him on the trip to go with us. And what's funny is when we went to, like you're seeing Tower of London, Westminster Abbey, like you're seeing history, like literally what he was learning in school, what they're learning about and talking about in school, like I'm there, okay? And then we go to Paris, and this is before it burned down, Notre Dame. I got to go into Notre Dame and go see it. Amazing. Also went to the Palace of Versailles. And when you go to the Palace of Versailles, you can totally understand why the entire fucking country of France revolted. Because the amount of wealth that is in that palace was the reason why those people couldn't fucking eat and feed their families and they're homeless. And he was learning that in school, but until you see it in person, you don't understand the magnitude. Like it's heavy. You ever walk into a place and it's like when I used to work at that placement school, the juvenile place, like
Yeah.
it's just heavy. It's heavy energy.
Yeah.
Like it was just heavy and you can feel it. Like I'm sure when you were, you know, you were at the Dead Sea, right? You
Yep.
got to go into the Dead Sea. Okay. Like you felt something, right? You're like, "Holy shit. Like this is in history books. This is in the fucking Bible and I'm right here."
Yeah, it wasn't only the Dead Sea, it was like the different like the Stations of the Cross I think was the biggest thing for me. Um I think the one that hit me the most was either the crucifixion site. You couldn't get to where it actually was. It was behind plate glass, and it was
Mm-hmm.
probably about 30 to 40 yards away from you, and it's all encased and all that kind of stuff and preserved and whatever. Um but the three places I think that probably stood out to me was that one, um the
Okay.
olive, the well, there's four. the Mount of Olives where he did the Sermon on the Mount
Yeah.
and where everybody is supposed to come back to. Because if you look at the Mount of Olives, essentially what it is, it's a massive gravesite. That's all it is.
Okay.
And essentially it's where family members bury the dead. So when the resurrection happens, they're the first to see Jesus Christ. That's where he's supposed to come back to. That's number 2. Number 3 was the pedestal or piece of land where he ascended to heaven. I touched the fucking thing. I was right next to it.
Do you feel
Um,
anything weird?
Me being agnostic, I probably didn't get as much out of it as I probably should have. But I
No,
will tell you that when I
you
stepped, because this is the crazy thing about it, is it's surrounded by a church. It's encased inside of a religious sect. It's like an actual building, like a church itself. You can walk up during sermons and pray at this thing. You can touch the rock where he was. And then the fourth one was probably what was the garden where he was arrested. Essentially,
mm-hmm.
you can walk in it.
How was that?
It's just one of those things, dude. You're like, oh, this is like it's a closed in area with trees in it. Like, but
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the significance of the different stations and where you're at, like, we hear about in the scripture about the fact that he was whipped to the point where like he couldn't even stand, right?
Right. Yeah.
You're sitting at the spot where that happened. You're
So
literally staring at it.
so as an agnostic, like, and going through that, going to these different places, did you feel anything? Like,
Not in the
what was your
literal
like?
sense
Did
as
you?
like I felt an energy or anything
No,
like
just
that.
where?
But when you're
Where,
when
where
you're
was?
talking about no, but I guess to answer your question, yes. Was it something to the fact that it was supernatural and it changed my life? No. Was it an energy? Was it a weight like you're talking about? 100%.
Okay, because like my thing is like, even though you're agnostic, was it like a feeling of like,
There's something here
okay,
that's
so
not
like
that's out
this
of
should actually, like this should actually happens, like this should actually happen, not like Jesus never existed. Like
Oh,
this
I went to his burial
something here.
sites too. The two burial sites that
This like this
are
happened.
widely considered to be the place where he was laid to rest. I was in the fuck. I wasn't in the thing, obviously, but I looked at it from plate glass. I could see the inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
There were two different places that I went that he was apparently laid to rest. One was his burial tomb, and from what I remember, one of the sites where he was supposedly buried, I stepped into the thing. I was inside it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah, it's
the second one was again encased in a church, and it's in a ornate burial ground. So essentially, the one I went to first was essentially a cave. It was the inside of a rock.
right.
The second one I went to was inside of a church, and it had
A church.
ornaments and incense and you know all
Uh,
sorts of ornaments tied to it and this big to do, right?
right.
Essentially, what both shared in common was a stone slab
Mm-hmm.
about the size of a regular person. I'd say regular
Because
person as like
isn't
a
there?
five
There's
seven,
like
5'8", 6 foot, maybe max person.
there's like a plexiglass over the thing, right?
So the
In the
one I went
church.
to first, the burial site that's in the quote unquote makeshift cave, let's call it. Yes, you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
step inside of it, but I was up next to that plate glass.
Right. Okay.
The second one, I actually went inside the thing and was staring at it. Like there's like a little tunnel you can crawl into and go under it. and then it's about the size of like a bathroom, and a regular sized
All right.
bathroom in like an apartment or something, and you can literally look down at it. You can't touch it, but you can sit
Right.
over top of it and stare at it.
Yeah. Because have you ever? I've talked to you before about the show Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates.
Yeah.
He does an episode where he goes to those two locations that you're talking about. He goes there.
Yeah, one's in
So I
like
know
a
yes.
courtyard,
Yep, and one's in a church.
and one's in a church that's massive. I have a picture
Hmm.
of it on my phone still.
Yeah.
I took a picture inside this thing. And it's like this
Yeah.
big ornament, big enclosure with like, there's incense all around, there's ornaments of religious icons and all sorts of stuff. And it's like a tunnel. You walk in the tunnel, crawl, and you're able to come out the other side, and you're literally staring at the slab where he was buried, where the shroud was, where he was
Hmm.
buried. It's
Wow.
unreal.
It's crazy to me that all the traveling that dad and mom did all over the world, he never went to Israel. He never, and I asked him, I was like, why haven't you gone there? And he was like, I don't trust it, the government there and all that. I was like, yeah, but like, you know, he's like, I went to Egypt. He was there. It's okay. I was like, okay. And by the way, and this is, I can tell you off air, I'm not going to tell you on air, but there's a fucking crazy story. And my mom, if we ever wanted to talk about this, my mom can verify this. We could bring her on and she can verify it.
Mhm.
Um, but there were secret tunnels in the pyramids in Egypt that my dad found. Well, more so, he was shown by a high priest the entrance to them,
Mhm.
and he filmed it. And
Oh
I
yeah,
have
there was
that.
people with video cameras. There were people with digital cameras. There were you name it. There
Mhm.
were people filming inside the church because you're allowed to. So the two places I
Right.
was talking about are the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That's the church, and it's referred to as the Garden Tomb. Is the cutout tomb what I was talking about? That's sort of like inside of like a rock face.
Yeah.
Um, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I'm just reading off of. I googled it real quick. So the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This site has been venerated as Jesus' tomb since the 4th century when Emperor Constantine built a church there over a pagan temple. It's located within the current walls of the Old City. So the Old City is where the Wailing Wall, in case anybody's curious, it's Old Jerusalem versus New Jerusalem. There's a very big distinction between Orthodox Jews and people that are just Jewish. There's a very
Oh
big
yeah.
distinction between
Big one.
Jerusalem and Old Jerusalem. There's a huge distinction of what you're talking about.
Yes. Absolutely. Big. Big.
Um,
Big. Big. Big.
But at the time of Jesus, it was outside the walls, and if you're talking about the walls of Old Jerusalem, it's based on, um, I'm gonna forget the guy's name, Solomon's Temple.
Solomon. Oh
Solomon's
yeah.
Temple, the Wailing Wall. For people that don't know, the Wailing Wall is the last structural, stable wall of Solomon's Temple. In case you were
Yeah.
curious what the Wailing Wall actually is and what it means to the Jewish people, that's what it is.
That's the wall. That's the wall that like every leader of the nations, when they come visit Israel, they touch that, right? Is that?
Yes, but the craziest
Yes.
part about
Yeah.
the Wailing Wall, and I have a video of this as well as pictures there, that's where they stick prayers, is inside the cracks of the wall.
Right.
If you
Right.
walk
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the wall
Yep.
itself, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands
Of
of pieces of
prayers.
paper that are prayers that people have stuck in the wall. It's wild.
So my question to you is, I think this kind of goes back to like, it can kind of go back to Tesla, but like words have meaning more than we know, right? And it kind of goes back to like the Anunnaki and like the Sumerians, more so the Sumerians were figuring out unless the Anunnaki really did create them or create us, whatever. But like the whole sound frequency thing,
Yeah,
like every word, every vocalization that we do, everything has a frequency. Those prayers that people put have a frequency when you say them, but also like the power of thought in the mind
yeah,
when you write stuff out. When you write it out, you're creating it, right?
right.
You're not just saying it, you're
In
creating it.
essence, you're bringing it into the physical realm versus just the unconscious or the conscious realm as far as your mind is concerned. You're bringing it into the world
Right.
versus it being inside of you. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Um,
I just
no,
think
but
it's really interesting.
no, it is. And so just to get back of what these two mean, I'll just finish it out because it's really quick. So, um, it was built outside the walls, which aligns with biblical account. A 2025 excavation uncovered ancient garden remnants beneath the church, aligning with the Gospel of John. It is a major pilgrimage site set for Catholics and Orthodox Christians. Now, the garden tomb on the other side, which is said to be the other site, it was identified in the 1860s. This rock cut tomb is located just outside the city walls. Bear in mind, same fucking location, give or take a couple, maybe a mile or two, and
Hmm.
has a distinctive cliff face resembling a skull or a Gothgaga or a Golgotha. Excuse me, I mispronounced that. Golgotha.
Okay.
Its location outside the walls and its proximity to a Skull Hill make it a strong candidate and a favorite for many Protestants who prefer its simple, peaceful atmosphere. The main challenge is dating, as some evidence suggests it is much older than the 1st century CE. The reason why this is important is because of Jewish law. Jewish law prohibited burial within city walls, so Jesus was buried outside Jerusalem near the site of crucifixion, Golgotha. Jerusalem's walls were expanded over time, which is why both the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Garden Tomb are now located within the current city walls of New Jerusalem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
He was a criminal, so he was buried outside the walls. When they expanded the walls of New Jerusalem,
Right.
the
Yep.
the split is those two places. It's fucking
Crazy.
insane.
Yep. And
They
then
literally divide the old world and the new world.
in the new
It's
world.
fucking
Yes.
crazy to think about.
Hey Blake, that kind of sounds like a reset.
It's fucking crazy, dude. It's fucking insane.
Kind of, kind of sounds like a reset. I don't know. I mean, to kind of like to get back on like the Anunnaki thing. You know how I mentioned Gilgamesh earlier?
Yeah.
So scholars have found profound similarities between the mythologies of the Anunnaki and the Nephilim. 1971, Edward Lipinski published a scholarly analysis of several ancient texts, including the Old Babylonian version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, all which feature important details revealing the true location of the sanctuary of the Anunnaki in ancient Eastern thought and cosmology. Lipinski found that, in fact, the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic identifies Mount Hermon and Lebanon with the dwelling of the Anunnaki. While later mythology suggest alternate locations for the home of the Anunnaki, Lipinski explains the oldest Mesopotamian and Near Eastern, I'm going to fuck this up, Canaanite texts point to the cedar forest of Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is located at the southern end of the anti-Lebanon mountain range, straddling the borders of Syria and Lebanon. Hermon's highest peak reaches 9,232 feet. Gilgamesh was renowned in the ancient world for obtaining knowledge from the pre-flood world, as stated by the Ugarit Epic of Gilgamesh, lines 5 through 9. Here's the quote. He explored everywhere the seats of power. He knew the totality of wisdom about all things. He who traveled the distant road to Utter who crossed the ocean, the wide sea, as far as the sunrise, he brought back tidings from the antediluvian age. End quote. These passages provide us full circle with Lipinski's interpretation of the Old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic, where the ancient king journeyed to Mount Hermon above the Anunnaki. And then it says that Gilgamesh the giant. So Gilgamesh was actually a Nephilim giant. The concept of ancient knowledge from the pre-flood world is actually inherent in many Eastern traditions. For example, there is a similar story in apocryphal Book of Jubilees about Kyanam, the son of the biblical Arphaxad. Here's a quote, start of the quote. And the son grew, and his father taught him writing. And when he and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the Watchers, in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and the moon and the stars and all the signs of heaven. And he wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. End quote. Interestingly, there are several ancient sources which suggest Gilgamesh himself was a half-god or semi-divine being of gigantic stature. According to the Sumerian kings list, Gilgamesh was the fifth king of Uruk, who reigned sometime between 2800 and 2600 BC, while there are traditions considering the father of Gilgamesh to be King Lugubadanda. The Sumerian kings list states that his true father was a Lulu spirit, a high priest of Kaluba, and he is described in the epic as two-thirds god. Now, the picture on this, and we'll put this link for our listeners, is Gilgamesh holding a lion by one arm, and the lion looks about the size of a medium-sized dog. So he is fucking huge.
Huge.
Or the president would say, huge.
Huge.
Is huge. Gilgamesh is believed to have attained victory over the kings of Kish, centralizing Uruk's power, and tradition has him expanding the city of Uruk, including its temple precinct and walls, in several fragments of a 12th century BC copy of the Gilgamesh epic discovered at ancient Ugarit. Gilgamesh is described as surpassing all kings renowned for bodily stature, and again as Gilgamesh, renowned for bodily stature, hero born in Uruk, bunning wild bull. Lines 34 through 36 of the Ugarit Gilgamesh offer specific details on Gilgamesh's size. 11 cubits was his height, 4 cubits the width of his chest. A triple cubit was his foot, in a reed length his legs. According to these measurements, Gilgamesh would have stood between 16 and 18 feet tall. In connection, Gilgamesh being a giant, the fragmentary book of Giants from the Dead Sea Scrolls names several Nephilim giants as Oya, Maya, and Haya, and Gilgamesh.
It's all, I guess, I guess what it comes down to, dude, is that there's stuff that we don't understand, and there's
Hmm.
multiple accounts of this stuff happening where you can call it a deity, you can call it a god, you can call it a whatever. It's something that's otherworldly and something that's not of
So the
this.
question,
It's not of this realm. But the question is, who's right?
well, the question is, I think, is it fact or fiction?
Yeah, it's true.
And I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. Like, we could literally do a whole series of episodes on this shit. So, like, with the amount of, and again, the correlation, like, you take Gilgamesh and then with like ancient Egypt,
Yeah,
there are a lot of um, people, scholars, geologists, not mainstream, because mainstream, mainstream always poo poos everything,
right.
right?
It's something that
Um,
doesn't fit the agenda.
oh yeah, it doesn't fit the agenda, and if they acknowledge that this shit is true, then they would have to completely rewrite textbooks and history, admit they were wrong, and their ego's too big, and I don't understand why they can't just say, like, yeah, you know what, we were wrong. We thought this for this long, we found new shit, and now it's this.
Because
Like, it's okay.
there's umpteen
I,
amounts of, and I will tell you why.
well, it's the
It's
money.
for it's for a couple reasons. It's to save face. Obviously, the money is a huge
Hmm.
factor, and people are
Hmm.
going to be labeled as either liars or omittance of the truth.
Yeah, but we almost need to give them like an exemption. Like, we need
I
like to come
100%
together and be
agree
like,
with you.
"Look,
I 100%
listen,
agree
like,
with you. But what I'm
you
saying
can
is
only,
it's the fear.
yeah,
It's the
you're right. You're
fear.
100%
It's the
right. Yeah.
fear of going
Mhm.
against something that is so well ingrained in our society and our way of life. That's scary.
Have you heard of
You're
Graham
challenging the
Hancock?
narrative. You're challenging a narrative that has been, for lack of a better term, let's just use biblical words, gospel. It
Hmm.
is taken as fact. And you are
Hmm.
labeled crazy or insane or out there if you think otherwise. You're
100%.
you're killed over it. You are wiped from the earth.
Destroyed. Have you ever heard of the journalist Graham Hancock?
The name does sound familiar to me a little bit.
Okay, so he's been on Joe Rogan a couple times. He is a ancient astronaut theorist, but he just asks questions, right? He has on Netflix there's 2 seasons. I hope he gets more, but he's got 2 seasons. He's done years, decades of work on um, studying ancient history, and he believes that there was an ancient civilization before um, the Great Flood. Okay, and he's had Randall Carlson come on, and Randall Carlson, he's the guy that has studied like ancient water lines and stuff like that, and water paths and stuff like that. He's been on Ancient Aliens. Graham Hancock's been on Ancient Aliens. But Graham, Blake, if you have not, and our listeners, if you guys have not watched Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix, please do. Um, because Joe Rogan actually had Graham Hancock and one of Graham Hancock's biggest like naysayers. Like the guy literally called Graham Hancock. So Blake, Graham Hancock has been labeled a racist because he has questioned ancient history, ancient historical origins.
Yeah,
Race means nothing.
that's pretty
It's
wild.
like it's but and then the guy that labeled him a Nazi and a racist denied it on Rogan, and Rogan called him out and then showed him his tweets of calling Graham a fucking Nazi and a racist. And the guy still fucking denied it and said it was taken out of context. And I'll find his name in a second. I'll
Yeah,
call him out
like
because the
I
guy's a
said,
fucking
with the
piece of
different
shit.
sources and the different stuff that we want you guys to sort of tune into, we'll label all that, and whatever we can that we've sort of talked about, we'll sort of go off air and add some context as far as what you guys can read up on, and maybe even some stuff we didn't talk about that some of that we find maybe off air. But what I think it comes down to, and this is the thing about the podcast in general, and we talk about it, I think at the end of every episode, you guys are free to think whatever the fuck you want.
Oh, 100%.
What we're here to do is to challenge the narrative and to make you think about things that you might not have thought of previously. It's not saying that we're right. It's not saying that we know what we're talking about to a certain degree as fact. But, like I said, it's the same thing as somebody doing a math problem and saying, oh, why don't you do it this way?
Yeah.
Here's a separate answer that could make sense. That's all we're trying to do. That's all we're trying to get across to you guys in these episodes is that there's different topics that we talk about that have been very, 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 very one-sided and have been monopolized by certain groups, entities, people, sects, religion, whatever you want to call it. And we want to delve into the other side of it and figure out what the real answer is and talk about it.
It's mainstream, right? It's the mainstream education. It's the mainstream media. They control the narrative. And like mainstream, like religion. Think about the Vatican, how big they are.
It's its own city.
Christianity. It's its own country.
Right.
Fuck city.
Right.
It is its own fucking entity.
It is a sovereign state. It's its own thing.
State. It is its own state. And I mean, we want to do an episode on some conspiracy theory shit. The Vatican. Whew.
Yeah. It's
a lot of crazy shit there.
It's heavy for sure.
Definitely heavy. But I mean, as far as the Anunnaki goes, we kind of scratched the surface. We could do probably 30 more episodes on that whole thing. They're the star people. And I know at the beginning of the episode I mentioned, Native American history. The Native Americans believe that they came from the Pleiades constellation, star constellation, which, don't quote me 100%. I'll take a look here in a second to make sure, but I think Nibiru is from that constellation. Let me double check this. But I mean, like Native Americans will tell you that their ancestors came from the stars. So, saying that Nibiru was an ancient Babylonian astronomical term for a planet, often Jupiter and Mercury, or a point of crossing / equinox, not a star or fixed constellation. So Nibiru is its own planet, which I don't know if everybody's been paying attention, but there is a recent planet that they have discovered past Pluto that is now coming into orbit. Blake, have you heard about this?
No, I haven't.
There's a new planet. Look it up. If you don't believe me, look it up. Pull it up on Google. There is a recent planet that has appeared. Not a moon. Not an asteroid. Not a satellite. It is a planet that has appeared past Pluto. And everyone's saying that is Nibiru. I know I've botched that name probably 5 or 6 or 7 times now, but whatever. I at least know how to spell it. So that planet now, out of all the times to appear, and you want to talk about the Great Reset and the schedule, Blake, that you were talking about, this fucker now appears. Not only does that planet appear, but we have this mystery object that is, 7 miles long, 10 miles long, shooting through our solar system that originally looked, they thought it was a comet, but now it's actually got like lights and a beacon, and it's like actually changing trajectory and course, and they think it's an extraterrestrial spaceship. Like mainstream is talking about that.
Right.
So I think that's interesting. Like all this stuff that we talked about on this episode, you're getting like things that are happening in the sky that are showing you that like, oh, this shit like kind of fucking real,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just interesting. And what's really fucking interesting is the ancient Sumerians and like the Aztecs and the Mayans and like all these ancient civilizations and cultures. Blake, they were masters at understanding the sky and the solar systems. They knew and had fucking hieroglyphs with our sun and the 9 planets. Again, 9. Pluto's a planet. Fuck you if you say it's not. I did a report on that in 4th grade. So fuck you if you say it's
So
not.
you essentially know
Pluto's a
everything
planet.
about Pluto. Fourth grade is wild. Anyways, continue.
100%. 100%.
Fucking expert
Okay.
over here.
I'm a Pluto expert, so fuck off. Um, back to the Sumerians, Blake. They have hieroglyphs on those ancient scrolls. Look it up if you don't believe me. Of 9 planets orbiting a fucking sun and star constellations. And in South America, they had observatories on top of their fucking pyramids that were for stargazing. They understood the solar systems. They understood the stars.
That's not
Why
by
were they so? Why
that's
was
not
every
right, it's not
ancient
by chance.
civilization? Why was every ancient civilization so enthralled with the stars?
Right. Yeah.
We have light pollution now. You can't like unless you live, you know,
In the middle of nowhere.
away from a city, right? You don't see as much.
Right.
Dude, I would if I had a time machine. People are, would you go in the future or the past? I would go in the fucking past every fucking day because I would love to go back in time where there wasn't light pollution and you could really study the stars. And again, the Native Americans, they believe that they came from the stars. They came from the Pleiades star system. It's crazy. And there's a lot of ancient civilizations that talk about that.
And be able
So,
to see where it's all coming from. But
yeah.
I think what we'll wrap on is a simple sentence. Is that there's always two
Mm-hmm.
sides to every coin. There's always two sides to every argument. There's always two sides or multiple sides
Mm-hmm.
to everything you could possibly talk about with daily life and why we're here. So I think it was a very intuitive episode. I think we covered a lot of ground. We also didn't get to a lot of stuff. And it's a complex topic. I think that's what people have to remember too is that it's not just one thing, it's multiple things at a time and multiple things that you can talk about. And like Dan said, we sort of just scratched the surface of what you know, if you want to get really in depth, you could take one of these civilizations and do an entire episode or an entire series or an entire show or it's the knowledge out there of these civilizations and the mythology of everything and why we're here and all of that stuff. It's multi-segmented. You can't just take one thing as, and I think you'd be naive to do so. The things are too
100%.
it's too big. There's too much information. There's too much record. It's insane. But like I said,
Mm-hmm.
on Obscuracast, there's a lot of stuff that we'll talk about that's multifaceted, and we're not going to be able to cover all of it in an hour and a half or 2 hours or however long we go. But the main point of the show is to make you guys think, because if you're not thinking, you're dead. I think that's what it comes down to, is that if you're not trying to figure things out or extrapolate data or think outside the box, I think you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. You have to have an open mind. You don't have to agree with it. Like there's several things that we talked about tonight that I don't necessarily agree with, but I have an open mind, and it's like, you know what? I don't know everything. I don't think that's what this is, but it could be. And
There's
I
always
think
the
you got to be
chance.
able to.
There's always that
There's always
percentage. There's always that 0.01 out of the
yeah.
99%, 99.9,
There's
right?
there's always that chance, and to cut something off because it just sounds too outlandish when there's so much. Here's the big thing for me. There is so much written history about this shit, and there's so many different cultures that span such a vast. I mean, Blake, look at the fucking pyramids of ancient Egypt and look at the pyramids of South America. The big ones, I think in like Machu Picchu or whatever, they align on the equator at the same exact point as the pyramids of Egypt. Not only that, they measure the exact same measurement.
Like the dimensions of them.
And the dimensions are the same. And guess what they fucking model themselves after?
Get me.
Orion's belt, the
Yeah.
star system.
Yeah.
So not only does the one in South America do it, but ancient Egypt does. And then you got the pyramids in northern England and in Asia. Now there's two fucking explanations for that as far as I'm concerned. Either one, these motherfuckers traveled a hell of a lot further than we thought they did. And these ancient cultures mingled with each other. Okay? Or they were ancient extraterrestrials that came down and helped them.
And said, this is the way we did it over here. Why don't you give this a shot?
Yeah, here's how you do it.
Yeah.
Here's how you do it. Here's how it's done. You know, and then you can get into the Nazca lines. Have you ever looked into the Nazca lines?
No.
The Nazca lines are super interesting. If you got Google open, look them up. There's like images in South America, in the plains, Nazca plains, that are embedded in the ground, and the only way you can see there's animals and what looks like an alien, like you know, like the gray aliens where they got like the fucking like big eyes and shit
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
There's that in a hillside in Nazca.
So it's pictured.
You you can't. It's a picture of like a gray alien, but then there's like monkeys. There's like animals and birds, and there's like these mountains, and then all of a sudden a mountaintop is just. It looks cut. It looks like a fucking runway. They're cut, and there's no rocks at the bottom. It's just gone. It's just like a fucking mountain. And it's just a plateau. It doesn't make any sense geologically. Looks like a runway. It literally looks like a fucking runway. So if you look it up on Google right now, you'll see Nazca lines. And the explanation that academia gives you, it just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah.
The only way you can see these fucking things are from the sky. So what was the purpose? Why would you put the work in and the effort to do all this shit when you can only see it from the sky? Can't see it from the ground.
Yeah. Like I said, it begs the question of, were we just popped here, or were we conditioned to, I guess what I'm saying is that, is there a reason we're here that's not because we just popped up?
Well, there's an interesting theory um, that I've heard is that this planet where we're at, where all of us are at, this is a harvest for souls. People come, or we come to this planet, our souls come here. is
Interesting.
almost like purgatory.
Yeah, that's interesting.
This is technically purgatory. Because if you think about it, this planet's very beautiful, right? You got a lot of beautiful things.
Yeah,
But there's also a lot of fucking evil here. So is Earth purgatory for
right,
souls waiting?
right.
Mm, I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. I don't know either. But like I said, we're getting on 2 hours. So like I said, we'll have everything up on Spotify for you guys. Um, I know we were a week late. We had a little bit of technical difficulty with an episode that we actually previously did that we're going to touch on probably in another future episode. Um, but I
Hmm.
know we were a week late, so we apologize for that. But we'll get this up as quick as we can. Um, it'll be available on Spotify. We're still trying to figure out. I'm the one in charge of the social media handles, so I'll get those probably cleared up before the weekend or after the weekend. You guys will be able to follow us on like Twitter and Instagram and whatever else we just deem fit to sort of put out there as social media. But I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Dan, you got any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, just keep your mind open and also like please comment on the comments section if there's something that you want us to delve into that you think would be a good episode, please comment and share. Like we're open to talking and looking into a bunch of different stuff. So please let us know if there's something that you want us to look into.
Yeah, make sure to follow. It's Obscuracast. Like I said, it's on Spotify. So if you guys would go follow the podcast, like Dan said, we're open to interpretation. We're open to talking about topics unless they're completely off cuff and they're just trolling. We're pretty open. We get too far into the weeds as far as stuff because we're not government officials. We're guys that have been around for a while. Um, and have heard some crazy stuff, both from internal points of view, the people that we're close to, and also we've sort of done our research and sort of talk about topics and do the research and look stuff up on the cuff. So, like I said, if there's anything that you guys want to talk about or want us to talk about or delve into, we're pretty open. So, like I said, it'll be up on Spotify as soon as we can get it uploaded and edited and everything. It's going to be a pretty much cut and dry podcast from the very beginning. We just got to do some trimming, but without any further ado, dude, I appreciate the time and we'll catch you guys on another episode and hopefully you guys enjoyed it and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yep, see you guys.